Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Best of the Pedalshift project. This episode, we are going to celebrate the 4th of July, Independence Day here in the United States, and the great weekend that it always is, by going back all the way to episode 018, episode 18 of the Pedalshift project. And this one, I have to say, is one of my favorites, even though I've lost touch with Nathan. We had a great discussion on what he called simple touring by bicycle. And I think that there are a few elements to this that I think is worth revisiting. And number one, this was a fun recording to listen to. This was the two of us, and a microphone. And I'm going to have to confess the audio quality on this isn't as high as what I eventually got to in later years. But this is the two of us sitting down with strong beverage in a cup and enjoying a campfire and the crickets after a full day of riding on the C+O. And this was the very first day of his eventual cross-country tour across the United States. And what I really liked about it, and still like about it, is that it is a snapshot in time of someone who has got literally the entire tour ahead of him. And, you know, all of the thoughts that he had on what the adventure was to come. And I think that it also was a great way of showing how you can ride for something maybe that's a little bit bigger than just yourself. I mean, these rides are a big undertaking. And, you know, we hear about this all the time. I've had a bunch of folks on the show that have done cross-country tours. But I think that a ride like this, a ride like James is doing for the Ride for Cora, who is a much more recent guest on the show, is that when you've got a fundraiser, when you've got a larger charitable thing behind you, that can be something that makes the ride even more special and more important for you. Some of the things that we talk about in this, of course, is the C+O itself. We talk also about, all sorts of things. That's another reason why it was just such a great, wide-ranging, quote-unquote, conversation. Things like dehydration, crossing the Potomac River on that cool White's Ferry cable ferry, technology, parallels between hiking and bicycle touring, open-ended touring versus detailed planning and finding that kind of balance. Why there is no one right way, quote unquote, for bicycle touring. I think I even got to the point where I retold the story about Justice William Douglas and how he kind of saved the C+O, which is always a great story. One of my favorite stories about the late Justice. We even dropped a little bit of knowledge, a book that I recommend everybody read, Bikenomics by Elly. Got into electric vehicles. Man, we just covered the gamut. This was a really fun one. Make sure you check out the show notes, and that's pedalshift.net/018, and you will be able to get all of the links and all of the good stuff in there. Like I said, I've lost touch with Nathan over the years, but I think that his path was eventually away from a lot of the stuff that I think that he was going towards even at this point. And Nathan, if you are somehow, some way listening to this podcast, I hope you're doing well, and reach out. Wouldn't mind having another strong drink next to a campfire with you someday. So, we've had a day.
Yeah, it's been a great day.
Yeah. So, I'm with Nathan Clevenger. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Nathan Clevenger.
Thank you. And Nathan is with Simple Touring, which is a wonderful blog. And in new Pedalshift format, we're enjoying some beverages. This is this is water. Yeah, this is water.
We're rehydrating from the day.
Yeah, it's not water. It's
no, it's not water.
It's water that came from Ireland, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's the good water.
it's a proper kind of water.
Special spring.
So we went about we figured 36 miles. I think we went today.
Yeah.
And this was the kickoff for your big cross-country tour, and I wanted to sort of just kind of ask you tons of questions all about this.
Yeah,
and
sure.
You know, where you got started with all of this. Well, why don't we start there? You know, talk about your tour and what your sort of intention is with all of this, and then I definitely also want to talk about Phoenix bikes a little bit too, because they're a big part of it. So let's talk about that.
Okay, well, where to start? I think that My wife and I are moving back to the U.S. Well, I'm moving back to the U.S. My wife's coming for the first time. She's visited, but she's German, so we have to get her visa together and all that. I had several ways. I could have gone straight to Seattle, or I could have gone to Detroit, and to get a really cheap flight, I flew with Iceland Air. And you can get a one-way ticket for really cheap.
They can, yeah. And out of Dulles, a lot of people I know do that.
Flew to Dulles. Okay, they do it too. Yeah. I actually met a lot of Americans on this flight. It was really cool. They do it, and they're like, yeah, it's great.
Did you do the stopover in Reykjavik?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, which is great. It's fun. I'd like to take a week maybe with them, with my wife, if we ever fly with them again. But anyway, so to try to just originally I thought maybe I would take a train from DC to Michigan. I've done that before. Take the Amtrak, but I've toured. I toured last year. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be better if I just got a bike and biked to Michigan? And that's where it started. I didn't originally plan on going across the country. And I thought, and then I actually moved away from the biking idea and thought maybe I would hike, because I actually made a backpacking, lightweight backpacking gear. And so I've got gear for that too. But then I moved back to the biking and decided, well, if I'm going to do that, maybe I'll just go all the way. I guess the other part of it I didn't talk about was there was this idea I had. If I had taken the train from DC to Michigan, when I got to Michigan, I was going to build a bamboo recumbent and go to Seattle. So that's actually how the two ideas came together. It ended up being the bike cross country. But obviously, I wasn't going to build a bamboo bike in DC. I didn't know where. I didn't know anyone I could stay with, and blah, blah, blah. I even tried to find bamboo in DC. It's hard. Yeah. I couldn't find bamboo, anywhere nearby.
I don't see much bikey stuff made of bamboo in DC. Yeah. And I feel like it's a niche that would be nice to fill at some point. Yeah. Whether it's trailers or even just the bikes themselves.
Edit this out. We could go into business.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You could distribute my bike.
DCbamboo.com.
Yeah, get out.
Wait, don't steal that Pedalshift list.
No, yeah, right. But, okay, so lots of ideas, lots of thoughts, and I've been brainstorming a lot of stuff for months, and because I think we started talking about this 6 months ago when we made the decision that I would come back to the States, get things ready for her visa, etc. Yeah. Then I started looking for used bikes because I didn't want to buy a new bike. I wanted to buy a used bike because I had bought used bikes for a while now because I can fix them and I like to maintain them. And anyway, I found Phoenix Bikes under a used bike search DC. There were a couple other ones. Gearing Up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're new.
And I think Velocity, which Jerry, actually, the guy who stayed the Warm Showers host, actually volunteers there 3 hours a week.
Oh, interesting, cool.
And but it's a smaller shop, and actually, Phoenix Bikes was actually the most convenient, I thought, from Dulles and whatever. So I contacted them first, and I just wanted to know, how expensive is your cheapest, model? And they said $200, and I thought, well, I don't know what I'm on. So then I started thinking about just maybe going to Goodwill,
right,
and putting a couple bikes together and making a decent bike enough to get me to. But then I started talking to my wife about it a little bit, and then that's when we decided maybe we would think about maybe raising money and entering the partnership. The thing is, I didn't want to just ride for me. Like, when I had the option of putting together a cheap bike and then just riding and then just, it just didn't, it didn't seem right. So I wanted to actually try to do something good for someone else. And then the thought occurred to me, why don't I contact Phoenix Bikes again and say, hey, what if I was to raise money for your organization? The thing is that I wanted to support them. Mm-hmm. And anyway.
We should mention they're a community-based bike center that teaches kids. And do they go beyond kids? But I know they teach kids how to become bike mechanics.
They do some really cool
work.
Fantastic. They got this after-school program. so like every day they're out there, they actually go to schools and do these workshops and teach kids about bikes and shifting and braking and safety and all these things. And it's fantastic. And then of course they have this Earn a Bike program for the youth. They actually hire on as staff some of the graduates of their programs. Then actually two of the graduates that are staff now help put my bike together. So they also do community classes. So they mentor the youth. I think they have this on their website: mentoring youth, building community, all these things. Oh, sustainability. They have all these values that I just totally am on board with, and I want to support. And so it was just sort of it just came about organically. And my wife and I contacted them, and they thought, oh, this is a great idea. Let's do this. And so, and then it just sort of came to be. Well, they were like, let's build a bike, and so then that project came to be, and so it made sense then, of course, to why not, instead of just buying a bike and then fundraising for them, why don't they build the bike that I ride?
Right.
So it made perfect sense to just do it, and then that's where we are today.
Yeah,
it's
actually, and it's funny you say that's where we are today. We should mention where we're at right now.
Yes, I don't really know.
Well, okay, we're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, we are.
We are on the Chesapeake and Ohio Trail, which is a trail I've mentioned 1,000,001 times on the podcast, but we are at one of the campgrounds about 35 miles out from Washington, D.C. We came up a different route because of where Phoenix Bikes is located, but we're at a campground right now, and so I don't know if you can hear it. There's a campfire within about a foot of the recording device.
Yeah.
We've got the frogs that are chirping away, so I'm hopeful that the audio is picking up some or all of this, but in a way that still picks up our voices. So we'll see. But in any event, that's sort of where we're at right now. So it's quite a journey that you had to get from Germany to here, but from a touring perspective, most of your touring experience has been in Europe, and I'm curious, you've had one day of touring here in the States, but what do you see as maybe some of the differences that you've found within just maybe this first day that have popped out to you, something that's different, maybe some things that are the same?
Let's see. Well, of course, I think I mentioned earlier the drinking fountains. Because water is really important when you're biking, and sometimes water. There was a time when I was in Germany, near south of Strasbourg. It's along the Rhine River. That's on the French side. I camped near Strasbourg on the German side. And then I rode down the Rhine a bit, and this was a Sunday, and everything's closed on a Sunday. What I didn't know, because usually you can find an open gas station, but in France, nothing was open. I literally rode, how many kilometers? Like 80 kilometers with 1.5 liters of water total the whole day. Because
that's officially not recommended.
Well, but I had no choice, and because that night I was staying in Mulhouse with a warm showers person,
gotcha.
And it wasn't that far, but so that was the water that I had after breakfast. So I tanked up a bit from water I had the night before.
Sure.
So I still had that 1.5 liter bottle that I told you I had in the back rack.
Right.
So I started out pretty darn well hydrated, but then I found nothing open, not even bakeries, not even gas stations, and I was like, I hope France isn't going to be like this on Sundays. And in Europe, usually everything's closed. Sometimes you'll have a gas station.
I was going to say, my experience in France is nothing is open on Sunday at all.
Yeah. Well, and that's now later in my France trip, I did find some things open on Sundays, but that was just a bonus. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, I was well prepared, so I didn't experience that in Germany. I had always been able to get water, but like I said, the difference here is water, even just here, is so much easier to come by.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't enter obviously it's still important. I still got to plan for it, but
America believes in free water everywhere.
I guess, yeah. I hope that's always
except in California where there's none. Sorry. Which is sad, but
it is really sad.
Yeah. No, it was interesting because I had never thought about that. I mean, there are some things you take for granted, and
absolutely.
I've exclusively bike toured in Canada and the U.S., and in both of those countries, I've never had to think about purchasing water. I've done it, but for the most part, it's more because I like the bottle that it comes in, and I reuse said bottle over and over again.
Related subject. There was, for the last 20 or 30 years, there was this ridiculous push towards hydrate. And what they found is athletes were overhydrating by a lot. And the reality is that a lot of our idea that, you have to drink a cup every 15 minutes, that is total nonsense. Yeah. And it was mostly emotional, mental, I don't know what, in the person's imagination. And when they actually did testing, they found that people were dehydrated up to a certain level. If they didn't know, because what they were doing is they were having people exercising, and they thought they were receiving an infusion of fluids. And they weren't. And actually, when they thought they were being hydrated, their performance remained the same. But when they didn't think they were being hydrated, their performance dropped.
Interesting.
And so it was all in the mind. And that was the thing. And I heard this. It's a TED Talk, actually. And so check it out because it's very important. And that's why, you say not recommended to bike on a liter and a half. Of course, that's true.
Right.
But I didn't do it in a strenuous way. It was cold, so I wasn't perspiring a lot.
Sure.
And so actually, I didn't lose a lot of fluid. And by the time I got there, it was fantastic because, I tanked up back on water. I got good to go. And this guy, he brewed his own beer. And so I had a couple of, homemade beers. And, oh, man, it was fantastic. Great night. Like I said, this guy was, he was French.
Yeah.
But he spoke German. His English wasn't so good. So we actually spoke in German all night. It was amazing. Anyway, whatever. It was fantastic. But so that's the water thing. So that's one thing that stands out. Much of what I experienced today is very similar to
Interesting.
Europe. Yeah, because of the trail that we're on.
Right.
A lot of the bike paths in Europe are off the street. Mm-hmm. Lots of people using it. Smiling people, happy people. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the Washington and Old Dominion Trail today, which, if you've been to the D.C. area, it runs in Virginia. It runs between Arlington and past to Purcellville, Virginia. We went just to Leesburg, and that's where we were able to hook up with this really cool cable ferry that takes you across the river and hooks you up with the C&O. And that's a big route that if you want to do a crazy ass loop, you do the C&O out or the WAD out, and then take the cable ferry and then take the other one back. And I think it's a 90-mile loop that I did once and then swore off ever doing again because it's a pretty long day. It's a good long day. But
start early.
Yeah. The thing that I wanted to learn more about from you is the fact that your site and your blog is about simple touring, and I was really drawn to that concept because there's an element of minimalism which I think is really interesting. But using what you've got and all of the various aspects of that, a couple of thought points on what your take is on touring, especially when it comes to what simple touring is to you. Yeah.
Well, some people, for instance, to me, the way that I tour is simple. It's minimalistic, and I find that simple. But when I posted my first, what is simple touring, or something else I posted, I don't have it up anymore because I have to remind myself that when I write a blog, I'm writing for the reader. Mm-hmm. I have to write something interesting or be able to at least articulate my point. And it was one of my first posts and whatever. Mm-hmm. And I got this comment. Well, I think it kind of got passed around Twitter a bit. And I had somebody comment, that does not sound simple to me. And I'm like, oh. And then it made me think that, these people think it's simpler to work 60, 70 hours a week in a job they don't like so that they can spend thousands on a bike and thousands on a tour. They think that's simpler. And I understand that. Buying an LH or, a long-haul trucker and not having to worry about your bike and on. But there's always a trade-off. And right. I think it's simpler for me to buy a cheap bike or fix one because, and it's more gratifying and I have a lot more free time. I don't have to work 70 hours a week in a job I don't particularly like. And I've done it. And I've done it for a lot of years and I don't like doing it anymore. So for me, it's simpler not to do that approach. And I don't think it matters how much money you make. I mean, I don't know that the money is ever worth it. Even up to they say happiness peaks at 70,000 a year or something like that. But, I don't know. Whatever. That's so if that answers the question or not,
well, it's interesting because, it sounds like you got some pushback from people who thought that your take on it was not simple to them in their perception and what their choices are. Sure. But for you, it was truly simpler because of all of the other aspects that get into your life. That's a really interesting take on it.
So there's one, there's a famous figure who hiked the Appalachian in its early days in the 50s. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Grandma Gatewood.
That name's familiar. I want to ask about the AT because I know you've hiked that.
Yeah, a little bit. I haven't done a through hike, but I did a section hike that was pretty long. But she stands out in my mind. There are some other ones that were great figures back in the early days of the AT. Sure. But she stands out because she literally hiked the whole thing in Keds sneakers. Amazing. With a bag that she slung over her shoulder that was homemade. She had a shower curtain as her shelter. She had an army blanket, a wool army blanket, a cup, and she would cook on a fire, and she would buy like Vienna sausages, and she would eat wild edibles, like rampions. And she said, "Don't call them ramps. Those are inclined planes." And she'd say, "Rampions are the thing that you eat." And so it was just, so that to me sounds very simple, it's total minimalist. It's amazing, and it's an inspiration to me. And so that's why I think of that as simple. Like it's more about the experience, and not about the gear. And I like tech too, but tech requires a lot of resources and time, and you got to plug it. But so and then of course it's about striking a balance between all of these gadgets but trying to focus on trying to experience and for me that's simple when you experience all of the wonderful aspects. Stuff that if you've got your face buried in a smartphone, you're going to miss.
Right.
There's this great photo someone took of this guy sitting on a sailboat with his face buried in his smartphone. I think I posted a picture on my blog, and right next to him, there's a whale surfacing, like right next to the boat, and he totally missed it. And I feel like sometimes that sums up like modern culture. Like we've got our face in this thing, and I don't know. But life's going on around us.
Totally, yeah. And technology is an interesting juxtaposition because it can help us do so much. And, I find that it helps me to do more touring. But you're absolutely right. If all you're doing is trying to Instagram out a picture of, something that is happening in that space and you're not paying attention to your surroundings, you're probably missing something else.
It's like people that go to a rock concert and film the rock concert in there and they view it through their smartphone. And it's not... They're not in the experience anymore, right?
Exactly. They may as well watch the recorded version on their phone later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe it works for them. Maybe they don't know what it felt like for me to be. We're early 40s, right?
Right.
And whatever. And I went to concerts where that was the last thing I brought a lighter so I could go like this. That's it. And
yes, for those of you who are younger than the 40s, it used to be that we brought lighters, not just turned our cell phones on. Although I do have to say, I've been to some recent shows where a stadium full of cell phones on is a pretty interesting experience.
Yeah, I haven't been to one.
It's now that I've just said, you should experience life not through your cell phone. Of course, I've taken a few pictures of it, but my girlfriend is from Oklahoma and loves Garth Brooks, so we've been to a few Garth Brooks shows on this tour. And when he plays some of his ballads, the cell phones come out, and it's just like a starlit sky. It's a kind of interesting experience. But
I'd have to. Yeah. That would be fun to experience.
It's interesting what you said before about all of this, because I think about the concept of what you see and what you don't see in a vehicle versus by bike.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've done a bunch of touring, and especially on the Pacific Coast, and I've actually driven it. And I've done it in an RV on a book tour with my girlfriend. There's the second Kimberly reference. But, of course, I've also biked it. And it's amazing how it's such a strange juxtaposition to see slow transitions and seeing it at a bike's pace, almost like a real human pace, as opposed to 55, 65 miles per hour, where it's just sort of like you're just zooming by. My experience when I was saying, hey, this is a campground I stayed at, and then no more than maybe, let's see, an hour later, we're past the next one. And that took me a full day to get to. And it's just so strange to be in that space where, we're doing this at all fast forward. It's like, it feels almost, it was sad to me in some ways, because I was like, wow, we just zoomed by a whole bunch of experiences that I just had that was far more memorable to me by bike. Even though it was great to be able to do it in an hour, taking that distance in a day was much more memorable, and it's something that I'll always keep with me.
Absolutely.
So that's why bike touring's always been very powerful for me.
And I like bike touring, I think, now more than I like hiking, because hiking is a little bit too slow for me sometimes, and it's harder on my joints, and sometimes, I don't know, whatever.
Dude,
and you have to carry all your
barely
gear.
40. We're barely in our 40s.
Well, I feel older than that sometimes.
I hear you. Me too.
But carrying everything on my back. Look, after hiking 3 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks on the Appalachian, I felt great. Don't get me wrong. But I felt great after my France tour. So yeah. But I don't know, whatever. It's all.
Tell me more about your AT experiences, because that's something that is about one of the closer, I don't know, it feels like the AT and the Pacific Crest Trail are two experiences that are
really close to bike touring experiences. There's a lot of people in there. You'll end up having some camaraderie. I saw the movie Wild that came out recently, and I understand the book's really good. Yeah, Cheryl Strayed. Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
And I thought that was an amazing story from her, and I'm really interested because I think the Pacific Crest Trail and the AT have a very similar vibe to them. Mm-hmm. What was your experience like on the AT, and do you see those kinds of parallels with bike touring at all?
Yeah, I mean, so to through hike the Appalachian, 22 miles. I think it's 21.75 or something.
You're the second person to ask me that in the last couple of days,
really?
too. And
I think it's 21, but it varies from year to year. Sometimes they reroute things and it changes, but I think generally it's about 21.75.
Or if you do the dreaded blue blaze technique, and how dare you do that if you're a purist?
If you slack packer, right? But I think that so it takes maybe the slow person like me. It would take 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
But I would also do it because there's some people that want to hike 25 miles a day and they got their face buried in the trail in front of them and they miss what they're walking past because they're in a race or something. I don't know why they're. I mean, I understand it.
Maybe they only have a finite amount of time.
Well, no, I totally get that. But I feel like
back to the job or the next thing or whatever.
Yeah, I do. I get it. But I sort of feel like, well, maybe that time would be better spent doing something else because while you're there, you might as well be on a treadmill. I mean, if you're not really looking and experiencing anything except for the dirt and where your foot's going to hit, I don't know. I
think there's a lot of people that it's sort of like climbing Everest. It's sort of like through hiking the AT.
Yes.
It's like something that you can tell your grandkids or whatever.
Yeah,
and so maybe there's a little bit of that.
Right?
Yeah.
But you see, okay, so there's that. Okay, but that's not me, and I'm more of that person, like you said. I want to take the time. I want to see it better. Yeah. Like I could go do it in a car, but I want to experience it. And so the Appalachian, it's great. But with biking, I find I can see more, and I can always stop when I really want to just spend some time. But I don't feel pressured to get somewhere in a certain time, and that's what's wonderful about this trip. It's pretty open-ended. I can go as fast as I want or slow as I want. I mean, obviously, I can't take a year or something. I wouldn't do that. But you know what I'm trying to mean? Every time I'm trying to say that, yeah. So
what I think is really most interesting about your trip is you do have a really open-ended nature to it. I'm a crazy weirdo planner. I will plot out my route, and I'll leave room for deviation and whatnot. But
I've done that too.
Oh, sure.
The first time I thought I would hike the AT, I would go to this shelter, then I would do this, and then I would, and then reality.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Once I got there, the first time I did the approach trail of the Appalachian, and then I hiked up to Neal's Gap, and I only spent about 5 days, and I'd trained on flat Michigan ground, and I had no respect in my head for those old mountains. And they route that AT up really steep inclines, and I gained a lot of respect for those old mountains.
Yeah.
So the next time I went back, I did it for about 4 weeks. The second time I went back, and well, it wasn't like it is now. So it's a progression, and I've learned. And so that, with this trip, it's like, I don't know, somehow strike a balance where some days I'll probably go harder, some days I'll go softer, and then, but I've got a target end date, but it's okay if I go a little longer. It's okay if I finish earlier.
You're not even totally sure what your route's going to be past Pittsburgh or maybe Michigan, perhaps.
Well, like you said, I used to plan.
Yeah.
But even I planned out my friend's trip. Oh, in fact, I was originally going to try to make it to Gibraltar. But I totally misjudged my mileage and found that when I got down to the Mediterranean coast, I didn't like riding on the coast. I prefer the inland country side and so on. And so I learned then, no, I'm not going to just be stubborn and hard-headed and stick to the plan, right? I'm going to drop everything at a hat and say, no, that's not the right way. I want to go where I want to go. And because that's the point, is to be happy and is to enjoy it.
Right.
So that's it. So that made me learn not to over-plan. For me, but everyone's different, right?
I agree. Oh, I think there's so many different ways to tour.
Sure.
And, it's funny. We just had an experience today on the cable ferry coming across where we were having a discussion with a person who was really resistant to the idea of bike touring. It seemed like asked lots of questions about it, but like, where do you do your laundry, and what do you do this, and how do you do that? And it was just really interesting. I think we tried to be as ambassadorial as we could about it, but it's just interesting that there's all sorts of different ways that people do it. And I relayed to her, she seemed to be much more interested in hotels and bed and breakfast and was not a camper. And I was like, well, there's lots of people who do that. I've run into guys who do that as well. And, there's all sorts of different ways to do bike touring. And that's what I like to celebrate because it's just, there's no one way.
Yeah, this touches on the first question. And one thing that I noticed, or what I sort of felt like, some people buy every bit of gear they can because they want to increase their comfort and they want to be covered in every possible scenario. They don't want to have any problems. And I can understand it. I mean, I really can. And but there's something in me, and I can't really explain it. But sometimes I enjoy not being comfortable and not being. I'd say a lot of times actually to go out and
bike touring is perfect for you.
Well, you challenge yourself, and I experienced a lot of problems in France on my trip, and overcoming these problems and problem solving, and I like that. I enjoy it, and seeing where my comfort levels are, and kind of getting in my own head, and that's when I feel most alive. Like I don't feel alive at home in the cushy. I get soft, and like I said, I still love the computer. I mean, I can spend hours on the computer.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's all about striking a balance, and I don't know.
Bike touring is the adventurous challenge for a lot of people, and I think your experience is very similar to a lot of us, including myself, where it sort of scratches an itch that is, you can find that sense in so many different things, but for a lot of people, hopping on a bike and going 50 miles, 60 miles, or 35 as we did today, it's like, but being out here, with the stars in the sky and the river flowing out here and a campfire with us, it's just, it's something that makes you feel like options are, I don't know if limitless is the right way to put it, but you have more options in your life than sitting behind a computer screen all day.
I do. I feel more alive, and I hope that I can bring my wife on future trips. I think I told you, there were a couple things she wanted me to do: build a bamboo bike for her trike, like a recumbent,
cool,
and that kind of thing. And I'm willing to do it if it, But then, like we were talking about, if I'm touring with her, I really want it to be safe, and I really want to be sure that that my wife is just safe, and so I don't know.
There's a lot of good opportunities out there for a higher safety situation on bike touring. There's trails like this where there's no traffic. Not that nothing can happen on a trail like this, but
it's perfect.
Yeah,
and it's long, 330 miles, especially for someone who doesn't bike tour very often.
Oh yeah,
like even just that is a huge tour. So even if my wife and I did this, it would be great.
Yeah, it's such an amazing resource, and it took me a long time to live in DC before I got into bike touring, but to know that this is here. Yeah. And it just got me started. It's really fantastic.
These rail-to trails are popping up all over the country, and it's so wonderful. Yeah. And I really love this push towards this national bike path. I can't remember exactly what it's called.
Oh, the national bike routes that the Adventure Cycling Association.
Well, I think there's that, but I think there's another organization besides the Adventure Cycling, and they're big advocates for this the national bike system. Yeah. Maybe they're affiliated with, I don't know, but hey, the more the merrier. I mean,
bike highways. It's a great idea.
I think it'd be fantastic, and
it's using some resources that we already have. We already have a lot of paved routes that are shouldered out properly or could be added, and it's a good shared resource. I mean, certainly we've seen the state of Oregon's got some studies out that has shown that bike tourism has been a huge boon for the Oregon economy.
Sure.
So having other states to take advantage of that reality is a really good thing. And so there's states like Minnesota, I know, and a few others that are doing stuff like that. So it's great. It's all good. But it's kind of nice to be on this like old towpath here that used to be something, that literally goods and service or goods were shipped from one part of the country to the other through this thing. And
it was single use, man. I mean, to move things
and it almost went away. A former Supreme Court member was a big hiker, and it was all set to, I can't remember what the ultimate degradation of the C&O towpath was supposed to be, but he joined some others in really rallying the cause to protect this. And eventually it was added into the National Park Service, and they run it now. And what a great resource it is. I mean, we got all sorts of campers, all sorts of hikers and bikers, and it's an amazing resource. And it's great to see that people value that at a level where we'll protect it for future generations. It's really great.
It's and we saw all generations today. We saw different kinds of bicyclists. We saw walkers. We saw runners. We saw
hand crank recumbents.
Yeah. I mean, is that
weird stair stepper bike thing?
Yeah, we saw it.
I saw it in an infomercial once.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that just you can't put a value on the experience when people have the freedom to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
To get out and be active, and if there's no place to do it, if there's no infrastructure for it, you're forced to either not do it at all or go play with the cars in the traffic. And I've never been comfortable necessarily doing that. And so I mean, I would love to get into advocacy and help. I do my little small part, and then just add my voice to a chorus of voices saying, "Let's do this. Let's use less fuel. Let's use less." I sold my wife and I sold our car 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we haven't regretted it ever since.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a financial burden we just don't need. We don't have to worry about car repairs. We don't have to. And Europe's a little different because we had really great rail system and stuff. But even here in DC, seems to have a really great...
Going car-free in DC seems to be something that a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
It's possible. Mm-hmm. You can't do it in certain areas, but I think that's true in a lot of different parts.
Parts of the country,
parts of the country,
yeah. There are some real isolated suburban areas,
and
well, you can't even bike in those places. A lot of times they have these fast, 2-lane roads with hardly any shoulder, and
absolutely,
they're just Yeah.
But I think that's a place where, if you have the means and the ability to do it, you can choose where you want to live to fit the lifestyle that you want. So,
that's
for
what
instance,
my wife and I've been.
Yeah, that's that. It sounds like, you're considering Portland as an official landing spot. And,
I think so, yeah.
And that's a place where if you're, I keep pushing the Sprocket podcast to you, but they talk a lot about car-free living in particular there.
Yeah.
They've got a great transit system and a great biking system. And frankly, if your needs are simple and minimal, you can really do pretty well in a city like that. You just don't need a vehicle that you own 365 days a year. You can get involved with car sharing or any of the variety of different ways if you need a vehicle. But as a primary vehicle, using your bike, you can do a lot worse.
Sure. Yeah. Well, upside, it's exercise. It's
who needs
saves a lot of money. Yeah. Well, I mean. Sure. I mean, saves a lot of money. You could use those resources for other things. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, when you do the math, I read Elly Blue wrote a great book called Bikenomics. That's one that I think maybe just...
I haven't heard that.
Talking with you, I think you might like her book. It talks a lot about just as you would expect, the economics of bicycling, and really interesting figures about what it means to own a car from a financial perspective and what it means as a society to support that. Mm-hmm. And, I think motorized vehicles, I think, are sort of they are a helpful, good thing that do good things for a lot of people. I think of ambulances and I think of all sorts of different things. Mass transit, of course, as well.
Sure.
But I think that, it is not necessary for every individual to aspire to own a vehicle, a motorized vehicle like that. And
look, I love to drive. I love to work on cars, actually.
Yeah.
I took after I got my bachelor's degree, I took a auto maintenance or auto repair class at a local community college, and it turned out to be my favorite class I've ever taken in college, and also one of the most useful. I've saved a lot of money in car repairs by doing it myself. Anyway, from that perspective, I still think that it's more valuable to me now not to drive. So, but it's been a transition. It hasn't happened overnight. Mm-hmm. And I still think that, there may be some time where I'll have to buy a vehicle. But by that point, and if I don't do it sooner, I'd like to have something that's I don't know. It'd be great if Tesla, Tesla's been coming up with some amazing batteries and things like that. Elon Musk or whatever his name is.
Their cheapest car is $75,000.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in buying a Tesla car, but I think
the idea of where it's coming. Yeah.
Well, the technology, they're improving it, and so we're seeing batteries now, which I don't know how green the manufacturer of these batteries really are. Right. I don't even know if this is the right direction. Honestly, I don't know. There's a lot of things I just don't know, and I don't know.
between the good electric vehicles. And there's all sorts of externalities with that. Electrical generation comes at a cost, and much of our electricity in the States is made with coal-fired power plants, which are terrible for the environment. So, I mean, there's
hidden costs and unintended consequences.
Yeah, and it's not a pure solution, but the direction is really interesting. Yeah. And I'm also really interested in the aspect of driverless cars, because I just read a really interesting article, and I gotta find it so I can link it in the show notes. But how driverless cars can lead to the end of single driving vehicles,
which would be great.
And the concept of what that means in our society is really fascinating, and the concept of whole industries going away, which is probably not good for people in those industries, like the insurance industry. Like, take away auto insurance, because when you've got,
you won't need it as much.
Yeah, the person, I don't know if auto insurance would completely go away, but it sounds like it would certainly be taking a big hit, and just all there. And that was just one of the things,
Yeah, you're touching on a huge subject.
It was a real size.
Why a lot of industries linger, even though they're bad for us and bad for the world, but they're going to persist as long as maybe longer than to where there's this point of no return, and it's because of that. So many people's livelihoods are wrapped up in them.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I'm a good person, but I don't necessarily like that this is happening, but I need to feed my family. I need to, whatever. So I don't know. I just know I can only change myself. And if I have to go to what may seem to everyone else is kind of an extreme, I'm prepared to do that, because I've found I'm actually a much happier person.
Yeah.
Extracting myself from the grind, the rat race. I was joking with my wife a few days ago that I finally have accepted that maybe I've retired at 41. Well, actually, I did it then at 38, because that's the last time I worked for the man. I don't know. I worked for a company. And, while I was in Germany, I did a lot of other things, but I didn't actually hold a job. I didn't hold a part-time job or anything like that. I developed myself, but not with a CV or a resume focus. Right. I did things that I learned how to cook, and I learned how to wrench on bikes more, and I did some touring, and I learned some web design, but mainly because I really want to just be able to do that for my wife and I, for our mutual pursuits down the road. I don't really aspire to be some web designer, doing graphic design. I don't know. But anyway, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we have.
I haven't actually retired, though. Let's just put it that way. I have no problem with hard work, and I'm going to definitely do it. But it's all where we put our energy. Do I, and these are huge questions I think a lot of us are facing. Some people, we're all from different situations, though, and so things affect us differently, and I don't know.
Well, we have covered the gamut, from biking down a trail to crossing the Potomac River to now metaphysical aspects of walks.
Yeah, wow. So, but bring it back to bike touring, right?
Exactly, yeah. But it all comes back.
Why do I bike tour? Yeah. Because it's one of the best things I've ever found. And I wish I could articulate some amazing description, but you just have to get out and you just get out and you do it, and then it becomes a part of you, and you have to do it. More.
If I may, I would say it fits your aesthetic, and it's something that I think fits a lot of people's notions of what is going to be their thing that maybe as a piece of their legacy too, It's sort of like we do all these grand things, It's sort of like not everybody can say they biked across the country. And assuming assuming if in a few months we can connect again, you'll be able to say that, I think. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing for a human being to through their own power cross a continent. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but then what's next after that?
Hey, it doesn't matter.
Around the world thing.
You know what? I think that's I think looking to the future is a really good thing, but at the same time, I think it's almost more important to think about what is today. And today is a piece of your plan to move across that country. And I think
that's the thing, and it's a day at a time. And that's why when people say, well, what are you doing? I said, there's a lot of miles between now and then. My wife would say, a lot of water will flow down the Rhine between now and then. The Rhine River.
Yes,
and that's exactly it. Look. My wife's teaching me. She's amazing. I think I've said that.
Well, it sounds like she's had a really big influence on you, perhaps even moving
the love
into
of my
this.
life,
yeah,
man. She's
great.
an amazing woman. So
Good
I'm
deal.
a very lucky guy.
How is it going to be for the next few months? I mean,
Tough.
Yeah. How is she taking it? How did she take it? I know that there's the aspect with the aspect with the visa and stuff like that. I mean, there's an element to the circumstances that you have right now before she can move to the States. But
we thoroughly covered this, discussed it. This didn't just start 6 months ago that we started talking. We started talking about this a long time ago, and we have ideas about the future. And when we finally started thinking about this, we knew it was the right thing, and so that makes it easier for both of us. We know it's for something better, and we're very clear-headed and of one mind about what we'd like to do and where we'd like to go in our lives, and not to get too specific about what our things that we've talked about, but I think that's where she's at. Yeah. She's very happy, and of course she's my what would you say if you have your support team, even though she's on another continent. She's with the internet. That's another. I mean, so the tech is great, because I can Skype with my wife. I don't have to use AT&T phone cards like I did, when I was
back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, right? Yeah. I mean, I can. It's just amazing, and so So I think she's good. We'll get her over on so we have to apply for her permanent visa. But in the meantime, we can get a temporary visa. She can come over on the temporary while we're waiting for the permanent.
Gotcha.
So it'll work out good.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think she deserves a medal, as do all significant others of anybody bike touring. The
willingness to
put up with a lot of our nonsense and our absences. So I appreciate them almost as much as bike touring itself.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? Do you how often? You did 6 months or 6 weeks.
6 weeks. That was the longest I've ever done.
Okay.
And I have to be honest, that was a long time for us. We've got it's. I think that's something that I'm mindful of, and it's something that I try to balance as much as I can. And so this year, I'm not going to go away for as long. I'm going to be doing much shorter tours, and in fact, I'm planning on hoping to do one while she's gone out of the country doing a business-related thing. So, trying to find a little bit more balance this year, but it's an ebb and flow with relationships, and I think that having to balance that, especially when your significant other is not a bike tourer.
Yours and mine.
Yeah, neither of ours. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's she likes biking, she likes camping, and so at some point maybe we'll do a 24-hour one.
Yeah.
But
my wife's like that too.
I think that's the type of thing that we'll try at some point. But I also have to say there is an element I think in relationships that can be positive when each of you has your own thing and
time to develop apart from one another and come back together.
But also sort of I do this. She does that, he does this, he does that, whatever it is. I think that there is some positivity that can come out in a relationship when you don't share every single interest together, because I think that can be stifling at times.
I think that's true.
And I particularly have that with Kimberly because we work together as well. So we're very much sort of in each other's shit the whole time. So.
Yeah, actually, my wife and I intend to have businesses together in the future, and we've been mindful of that too. We have to have our own thing as well because
it's challenging, but it can be really rewarding as well because especially if you balance that out as well. It sounds like you do,
and it sounds like if you're also doing something you both enjoy doing.
Yes,
that's crucial. If you're doing something you both hate, then that's just stress and why for money. There's a lot of ways to make money, and how much do we really need?
So that's the new segment on the show called Relationships on the Pedalshift.
Yeah, I know.
Well, Nathan, anything else that you want to share with the listeners before we close shop here for the night and maybe enjoy some more of our Irish water?
I mean, I just hope that... So I wonder sometimes about, will people in other parts of the country be interested in doting to the ride, if it's just some... bike shop in a faraway place. And
yeah, we should plug this. You've got
hey.
Yes, we will. I'll have a link in the show notes, of course, to it.
Yeah.
But you can give if you've got a few bucks lying around and would like to give to a really good cause. This is supporting Nathan and more importantly supporting a really great organization that's helping kids learn how to fix bikes and really getting them involved with bicycling. And I was able to see the facility today, and they had the Boy Scouts there, fixing out the outside.
It was an Eagle project or something.
Yeah, it was so 501c3 public charity, and it's a really great organization. And I think it's really good for you. I'm really pleased to see you do something like this. I think that to think beyond just your own adventure, I think that's a really great thing. And
so I didn't explain really, and I don't know how long your podcast.
Dude, this is the internet. We can go as long as we want.
Yeah, that's true. So you were talking about that. I mean, a lot of these kids, I don't know, I obviously didn't get to spend enough time as I would have maybe liked to get to know some of these kids and the staff. It was great to be able to spend the last couple days with them. But I paid a lot of attention. I've followed them for quite some time, and they have these great after school programs, and they mentor these kids and teach them skills that are just valuable. And it's not just that they learn how to fix bikes, because they do, and that's great. But it also teaches them skills that they can leverage into other things later.
Right.
It also gives them something that positive to do after school instead of running around who knows what. I remember when I was younger, and if I didn't have any who knows what kind of trouble you can get yourself into. And I think that this is a very positive influence, and what they're doing is great work, and you can tell by the kids' faces, it's amazing. And yeah, I don't know if I probably could say a bunch of other things, but I think it's always something that we should try to promote and to support. And so
it was real serendipity that I think you found them, and I'm really thinking that I'm hoping that we can get some support through the podcast for you as well. And
that'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nathan, thank you for joining us, and good luck to you. And hopefully we'll get reports from you along the way. And,
absolutely.
We'll hear from you on the Portland side of things.
Cool. Thanks.
And we like to end off the show, as always, with a big thank you to the supporters of the show, who are members of the Pedalshift Society. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings. We're talking $1, $2, $5 a month. Helps with the cost of hosting the podcast and the website. You can do it for a bit and cancel anytime. One-shot support is welcome as well. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Josiah Matthews, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Mark Messer, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, John Baxter, and Susan Brewster. And thanks also to all past contributors and anonymous contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.